Roberto Calvi was born in Milan in 1920, the son of a modest family. He entered banking in the 1940s, starting at Banco Ambrosiano, an institution rooted in Catholic tradition, named after Saint Ambrose, Milan's patron saint. Calvi was ambitious, shrewd, and tireless. By the 1960s, he had climbed to the upper ranks, and in 1975 he became chairman of the bank. Under his leadership, Banco Ambrosiano transformed from a regional Catholic bank into a financial giant with international reach. But success came at a cost. Calvi wasn't merely building a bank, he was building an empire, and he was willing to cut deals with some of the world's most dangerous players. Banco Ambrosiano's secret weapon was its relationship with the Vatican Bank, officially called the Institute for Works of Religion, IOR. The Vatican Bank had a unique advantage. It operated outside the jurisdiction of Italian regulators, making it the perfect partner for covert financial operations. Through the Vatican, Calvi gained access to a hidden network of offshore companies, shell corporations, and discreet accounts in Luxembourg, Panama, and the Bahamas. Money could flow quietly across borders, away from tax authorities and government scrutiny. Billions of dollars were moved in this shadow economy. Some of it came from wealthy Catholics hiding assets. Some came from multinational corporations avoiding taxes. And some, more dangerously, came from organized crime. Italy in the 1970s was a nation torn by violence. The Mafia, particularly the Sicilian Cosa Nostra, was at the height of its power. They controlled the heroin trade, funneled drug profits into Europe, and needed respectable institutions to launder their money. Calvi's Banco Ambrosiano became one of their laundromats. Through complex webs of offshore accounts, Mafia millions were cleaned and reinvested in legitimate enterprises. In exchange, Calvi gained protection, and more importantly, influence. With Mafia backing, he became untouchable. But he wasn't serving the Mafia alone. He was also serving another powerful force, the Vatican itself. The Vatican in the 1970s was deeply enmeshed in Cold War politics. Pope John Paul II, elected in 1978, was determined to fight communism, especially in his native Poland. But fighting communism required money, vast sums of it, to fund the Polish trade union Solidarity, support anti-communist groups in Eastern Europe, and provide covert aid in Latin America. Through Calvi and Banco Ambrosiano, the Vatican funneled money into these causes. Some say it was done with the quiet blessing of the CIA, which saw the Vatican as a powerful ally in undermining the Soviet bloc. Thus, Calvi wasn't just a banker. He was a geopolitical operator, a man moving money on behalf of the Church, the Mafia, and Western intelligence agencies. By the late 1970s, however, cracks began to appear. Banco Ambrosiano's aggressive expansion left it massively overextended. The bank had billions in questionable loans, many routed through offshore shell companies with little documentation. In 1978, Italian regulators grew suspicious. A young Bank of Italy inspector named Mario Sarcinelli began probing Ambrosiano's operations. What he found was alarming: irregularities, hidden debts, and opaque Vatican transactions. The scandal broke publicly in 1981. Calvi was arrested and charged with illegal currency exports. Humiliated, he spent time in prison, but after a brief conviction was overturned, he returned to his post at Ambrosiano. Yet his troubles were far from over. Behind the financial scandal lay an even darker secret: Calvi's ties to Propaganda Due, P2, a secret Masonic lodge in Italy. P2 was no ordinary Masonic group. It was a clandestine network of politicians, businessmen, intelligence officers, and military men, some say, a state within the state. Its leader, Licio Gelli, was a shadowy figure with ties to the CIA, the Italian far-right, and the Mafia. Calvi was a member of P2, and Banco Ambrosiano helped fund its activities. Through P2, Calvi's banking empire became intertwined with Italy's dirty wars of the 1970s. Years marked by terrorism, assassinations, and covert operations blamed alternately on the left and the right. By 1982, Banco Ambrosiano was collapsing under the weight of its fraudulent operations. Billions were missing. Creditors were demanding answers. Calvi was desperate. He wrote letters to Pope John Paul II, pleading for help. "If I am not helped," he warned, "the Vatican will suffer the gravest consequences." But the Vatican, facing its own scandals, turned its back. The Mafia, furious over lost funds, began to circle. And P2, fearing exposure, saw Calvi as a liability. Calvi knew too much. He was a danger to everyone. In June 1982, just days before Banco Ambrosiano collapsed, Calvi fled Italy. Using a false passport, he traveled first to Venice, then to Austria, and finally to London. He was accompanied by a young woman, Manuela Kleinzig, the secretary of Licio Gelli. He stayed in a Chelsea flat owned by a Panamanian company tied to Ambrosiano. From London, he made frantic calls, trying to secure help. He reached out to the Vatican, to the Mafia, to P2, to anyone who might save him. But help never came. London, June 1982. The early morning sun crept slowly over the Thames, glinting on the murky waters beneath Blackfriars Bridge. A passerby noticed something strange, a body hanging from scaffolding beneath the arches. A man in a grey suit, with bricks stuffed into his pockets, a length of orange rope around his neck, and cash tucked into his jacket. His name was Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, once one of Italy's most powerful financial institutions. The newspapers called him God's banker. To the Vatican, he was a trusted ally. To the Mafia, he was a money launderer. To Italian politicians, he was a financier who could make or break governments. And to the world, his death was a mystery, one that still lingers over the shadowy intersection of church, state, and organized crime. The police initially ruled it suicide. Calvi, overwhelmed by scandal, had taken his own life, they said. But the details didn't add up. Why would a man carry bricks into central London to hang himself? Why was his body found at Blackfriars, a site with symbolic resonance? Members of P2 were sometimes called Blackfriars. Theories swirled. Some said the Mafia had killed him for losing their money. Others said P2 executed him to keep him silent. Some believed the Vatican ordered his death to bury its secrets. What is certain is that Calvi knew too much, and his death ensured that the deepest truths of Banco Ambrosiano would never be fully revealed. In the weeks after Calvi's death, Banco Ambrosiano officially collapsed, the largest banking failure in Italy's history at the time. More than $1.3 billion had vanished. The Vatican eventually paid $250 million to settle with Ambrosiano's creditors, though it never admitted wrongdoing. The Vatican Bank insisted it was a victim of Calvi's manipulations. In Italy, trials dragged on for decades. Mafia bosses, P2 members, and Vatican officials were all implicated. In 2005, a Roman court finally concluded that Calvi had been murdered, but no one was ever definitively convicted. His widow maintained until her death that Roberto Calvi had been executed, a sacrificial pawn in a deadly game of power, money, and faith. Roberto Calvi's story remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern Europe. His rise and fall expose the dangerous intersections where banking, religion, and organized crime converge. He was called God's banker because of his ties to the Vatican. But he was also the Mafia's banker, the CIA's conduit, and P2's financier. His death beneath Blackfriars Bridge serves as a haunting reminder. In the shadows of power, those who know too much rarely live long. Even today, decades later, researchers and journalists continue to dig into Calvi's case. Some files remain sealed in Vatican archives. Others disappeared along with Banco Ambrosiano's money. Perhaps the truth lies buried in those missing billions. Or perhaps it lies in the quiet decision of powerful men who, one June night in London, chose to silence a banker who had become too dangerous. Roberto Calvi believed he was indispensable, to the church, to the Mafia, to the world of finance. But in the end, he was expendable. And under Blackfriars Bridge, his body told the world that some secrets are worth killing for.